Hello, everyone. I'm E-Train, and welcome to E-Train Talks, where I discuss all things books in the hopes of inspiring others to love reading as much as I do. And I'm on a mission to spread some kindness along the way, too. And today's guest is Shawn Peters, member of the newly created Fedora Friends. Shawn Peters is the author of the captivating realistic fiction story with a superhero twist, The Unforgettable Logan Foster. This book has everything that makes for a good story. From a brilliant neurodivergent protagonist, Logan, looking for his long-lost brother, to navigating puberty, not to mention defeating a dangerous villain in the process, and a whole lot more. The Unforgettable Logan Foster has it all. I gobbled up this entertaining and lovable story in one sitting. And it's filled with everything that makes middle grade my favorite genre, inspiring us to be the best version of ourselves. And with all that said, I don't want to keep you for too long, so it's my absolute pleasure to welcome debut author Shawn Peters to E-Train Talks.
Hey, E-Train, how's it going?
It's going really good. How are you?
I'm doing okay now that I'm wearing a fedora, like you.
Yeah, and fedoras are the best. I know that all of you will agree.
They're the best. They're the best for hat tricks, for looking dapper, for looking like maybe you stepped out of a time machine. Hey, they work.
Yeah, I just stepped out of a time machine. I don't know where I am. It's the 1950s. So what's this computer stuff?
Yeah, I was just saying, what's a computer?
Yeah. So before we begin our interview, I thought I'd share a few things I learned about Shawn while preparing for our book talk. For starters, Shawn and I have a few things in common. Instead of collecting stamps or Pokemon cards, we both read books, tons and tons of books from a very young age. And it also turns out that we're both cat lovers. So, and here's something you might not know about me. So Shawn Peters' protagonist, Logan Foster, and I have something in common. We're both huge fans of facts and trivia. Just a few things I thought I'd share with everyone listening before we get on to the really good stuff. So now, without further delay, let's get into the questions. So, it's always interesting to learn an author's backstory. So would you share a bit about your writing journey and why you decided to write The Unforgettable Logan Foster as your debut novel?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, E-Train. So I don't even know backstories, right? Like, because this is a superhero story, maybe it should be my origin story.
Yeah.
My origin story is that when I was your age, my father was a sports writer and my mother was a TV writer, and I wanted to be anything but a writer because, you don't want to be what your parents are. They're not cool. So I wanted to be an actor. I thought I was going to be on screen and all this other stuff. And I tried for years and years and, went on hundreds of auditions and never made it quite happen. But by the time I was graduating from college and coming back to Los Angeles, which is where I grew up for most of my childhood, I realized that acting wasn't for me. And I started writing, and I tried to write TV shows. I tried to write movies, and that I didn't hit it big in any of those things. But I got far enough that I kept getting new opportunities. I got a chance to write advertising, and I got a chance to write articles for the Boston Globe Sunday Magazine and for ESPN. So I was always writing, and always different stuff. And when my kids were about your age, I found myself reading all these amazing books, whether you want to talk about Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, but also all the books I grew up with. And I started thinking, I think I could write something for this same age group. I love these kind of stories. And at the time, wizards and magic was taken already, and certainly so was demigods and mythology. But I was a superhero kid growing up. I read a lot of comic books, and I said, I wonder if I could tell a superhero story for kids. And that's kind of where it started.
Well, that's Shawn Peters' origin story. And that's just the pretty deep exposition. And now we're going to get into the now. And anyway, I just think that The Unforgettable Logan Foster is a lot different than, really different than a lot of the other middle grade books I've read, because when you see a superhero story for middle grade, it's mainly a comic. But you made The Unforgettable Logan Foster not just prose, but also kind of realistic fiction. It's not as fantasy or just kind of adventure Of course, there's a lot of adventure involved, but it's not like Superman versus Darkseid. It's
Hmm.
just kind of Logan Foster kind of against himself in a sense. Of
Oh,
course,
that's a good point.
there are some villains along the way, but I feel like Logan Foster, it's really a story of him trying to understand himself, and that's why I loved your novel.
Thank
And
you. Oh,
thank
go
you
ahead.
for writing it. Just thank you for writing it. And so many others in the middle grade writing community. I think we're all kind of taking a little inspiration from Logan Foster's story.
I
So,
hope so.
yeah, I know so. And Logan Foster loves trivia, and it certainly helps that he has an eidetic memory. So he can remember literally everything. And I would want this superpower more than any other superpower. Of course, there's always a curse. There's always a curse. But will you share why you chose to give Logan a photographic memory? And are you also a trivia fan?
Yes, I am a trivia fan, and it's because growing up, I had maybe 1/10 of Logan's memory. Like when I was in school, I was a very good student. And one of the reasons I was a good student was sometimes when I would take a test or the teacher would ask a question in class, I'd raise my hand. And not only did I know the answer, I could actually picture where on the page I'd seen it. Or if it was something she said, I could almost hear her saying it again. And so Logan and I are not the same in a lot of ways, but I definitely wanted to give him a bit of a superpower that was based on something that I had experienced personally. And going back to what you said right before that, I'm glad that you take some inspiration and that you feel that there's a realistic element here, because at the heart of this story, yes, it is a superhero story, but I really wanted to tell a story about a kid who's been made to feel like they're different their whole life. They've been told they're different their whole life. And what kind of family would they need to find where they could suddenly feel, for the first time in their life, like the most typical person in their household? And for Logan, it takes him moving in with some pretty special people, but I think that everybody at some point or another has been made to feel different or other. And so I wanted that to be something that anybody that was reading, whether you feel like Logan or not, you could say, like, yeah, I have felt like the weirdest person somewhere. And maybe I wasn't. Maybe everybody was feeling that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I certainly felt that in The Unforgettable Logan Foster. That's just because a lot of superheroes, like for instance, you have a guy like Bruce Wayne who's a billionaire. He doesn't really face much adversity because whatever he says goes a lot of the time. But then you have a guy like Logan Foster, nobody really listens to him. He's kind of just alone in his thoughts. And finding those people, his foster parents, his new best friend, just finding those people, I think like I can relate to The Unforgettable Logan Foster, it and so many others can, a lot more than really any other superhero book, any superhero comic, because Logan Foster, he's basically a real kid, because so many kids go through what Logan goes through. Maybe they don't have the exact same experiences like you said, but we all feel different at times. We all feel like, oh, nobody really gets me. Whether it's, oh, I'm going through puberty a little bit earlier than others, or I I'm on YouTube the entire time and watching cat videos. So I just love Logan for that. He's probably like one of my favorite protagonists, if not my favorite protagonist of any 2022 book.
Mm.
Tell the other authors I said that.
I certainly won't say it to any of them. And if they hear it, well, we won't know where it came from. How
Yeah.
could they possibly have heard?
Yeah.
Well,
So, oh,
I thank you. I want to say thank you for that. And if Logan speaks to you that way, I've been lucky enough to visit a few schools, and I know a bunch of other kids feel that way. And that's my favorite thing, is when somebody says, "I think I know how Logan feels," even if they've never lived what Logan's lived. Which, I mean, who has?
yeah. That does sound like the best feeling in the world. And that's really like, wow, my readers are connecting with my character that I wrote. And so when like knowing that your readers really understand your protagonist, That's the best feeling, and I've heard it from so many others. And I want that when I write my book in the future. So I heard that there's going to be a Logan Foster sequel out in 2023, and I'm beyond excited to read it. And I'm sure everyone listening, including me, would love to hear maybe a few sneak peeks about the sequel without giving away any spoilers, of course. But is there anything you can share with us?
I can. So I was so lucky that right at the beginning of July, I was able to share the cover and the new title. And the title is The Unforgettable Logan Foster and the Shadow of Doubt. And it's not that long after the end of this book that book comes or begins. And Logan is learning what it really means to be a part of a family after never having that in his entire life. But he hasn't given up looking for that sibling and to understand why it is he can remember everything from when he was 3 on, but nothing before. Mm-hmm. And he's adjusting to some new stuff in the world of superheroes and Mask, which is the multinational authority for superhuman control. That's the organization in the book. When people find out your secret identity, they have to swap it out. So he and his parents are actually dealing with trying to have an entire new identity, but it's not that different because Logan only knows how to be Logan.
Yeah.
And I think what readers are going to like about the second book, if they like the first one, is that at the beginning of the first book, Logan doesn't have anything to lose, right? He's alone. Yeah. And by the end of the book, he's got friends and family. And what he's going to learn in this book is that once you have people that care about you and that you care about, life sometimes gets a little more complicated, especially when you're not sure what you can share with those people, because either maybe you're ashamed of something or you're worried that telling them might hurt their feelings. So I think that's something every kid goes through, is like learning about what they can and can't tell their family and friends and what's okay. He just learns it in a super way.
Yeah, definitely a super way. And what really caught my eye about your cover is, now I don't know if it really means anything, but I know that in The Unforgettable Logan Foster, when Logan was 3, when he started remembering everything, but he didn't remember his past, he was at an airport. And it looks like on the cover, he is at an airport. I don't know if that means anything, but maybe the hunt, because The Unforgettable Logan Foster, like, his journey to find his little brother was put to a halt because of all this, super stuff. Maybe he's on the trail. I don't know, but I'm curious to find out.
I will say that anyone that's read book 1 and sees that cover should react exactly the way you did. And I'm not saying that, he finds it or doesn't find it, but what I will say is that Logan's world gets a lot bigger in this second book. The entire first book all takes place in this one area of Southern California, and Logan's looking for answers. And you know what? Sometimes answers aren't all around the corner.
Definitely. I'm super duper excited for The Unforgettable Logan Foster, The Shadow of Doubt. And I'm sure everybody watching, they're jumping out of their seats. I would, but I'm trying to be kind of professional. Of course, I'm a kid, so I'm going to jump. Woo! So I'm just so excited. I can't wait for book 2. And I know that everybody listening, we're all super thrilled. And we are so excited to see where Logan goes next. And were there any characters in The Unforgettable Logan Foster that you modeled after people in your life?
Well, so I will tell you that Logan's voice and Logan's neurodivergence is based in no small part on one of my best friend's sons. And at the time I was writing this book, our family spent almost every weekend together, and his son is on the autism spectrum. And, I felt like I had kind of like an uncle relationship to this boy that I've known since literally a few months after him being born. And as he grew older and wanted to play games or watch sports together or do anything together, I realized that I needed to change the way I communicated with him because his mind processed information differently than me. And because I cared about the relationship, I did that. But his voice and Logan's are very similar. So a lot of Logan's vocal mannerisms come from him. And when I read him, it's like I'm spending time with him a little bit because that voice. But the other thing that you might be referring to is the fact that Logan's foster parents are named Gil and Margie, which are my parents' names.
Oh.
And I will tell you that my parents, when they brag about their son who wrote a book, they say, and he wrote a book about us and turned us into superheroes. And I say to them, but the book isn't called The Unforgettable Gil and Margie. It's called The Unforgettable Logan Foster. It's about Logan. And they say, no, that's nonsense. It's about them. So they love that I turned them into superheroes, although there are some things that are different. So Gil makes a lot of dad jokes, and my dad Gil makes a lot of dad jokes. Margie is tough and will absolutely fight you to protect the people she loves, and so is my mother's that way too. The one thing that's different is Margie's a terrible cook in the book, and my mother actually makes amazing food. So that's different.
Well, I'm a kid and I tell a lot of dad jokes, so I can
really my kind of kid.
Yeah, so I can really relate to Gil, and I honestly, I feel like I relate to every single one of the characters in The Unforgettable Logan Foster. You do a really good job of kind of making, even if they're kind of secondary characters, you still kind of give them a little bit of a story arc. And so the readers don't just relate to Logan Foster, but we can also relate to Gil cracking dad jokes whenever he has the opportunity, or Margie standing up for her family, no matter the cost. Or, I don't know, maybe there's a kid in the school who's completely random and doesn't have a single line, but somebody might relate to him as well. And I know that you're a dad of 2 kids, so I'm curious, did your kids read your original manuscript and give you feedback before submitting it? And if not, who were some people that you looked for writing advice?
So I finished my first draft of this when my daughter had turned 14. Mm-hmm. So she might have been just like the hint old for it, but she was still reading a lot of middle grade. And she was the very first person that ever read the manuscript. She even came up with the name Logan. I wasn't even sure what the first name of my character should be, and she liked the name Logan. And since then, I can't imagine it being any other name. My son at the time was only just about to turn 9, so he might have been a little young for it, but I did read it to him early on. So I got feedback from them, but I'll tell you the most valuable feedback I got on the entire book. And I had somebody that was a professional proofreader and editor read it, and I had a school librarian read it, and I had a friend who had worked in the publishing industry for a decade read it, and they all gave me great stuff. But my wife is she was at the time a 5th grade teacher, and she read it with her classroom. I gave permission for her classroom. So she had 2 different classes that went back and forth. So 100 5th graders read it, and I got to go do an author visit with them. Now, no authors get to do author visits before they're even published, but I got to talk to 100 5th graders about this book. And they thought it was cool because they were like, oh, we have an author in the classroom. And I thought, I'm doing market research. I am actually finding out what kids think about the book. And they loved it. And especially some of the reluctant readers and some of the kids that were neurodivergent, whether they were on the autism spectrum or ADD or Tourette's, they were the ones that wanted to talk the most about it. And they were the ones that picked up on things that weren't obvious in the book. And I said, boy, I think there's something here. And they gave me the best piece of advice, which was, I asked them, at that point, the book was not written to Logan's younger sibling. It was written to Logan's mom. And I asked them what they thought. And they said, it's not that good because I'm not Logan's mom. And I was like, you're right. Why would a bunch of 10-year-olds want to read something written to a mom? And so I went back and that's when I came up with the idea that he had a sibling that he was looking for. And I think it totally changed the book for the better.
There were so many important themes interwoven into the Unforgettable Logan Foster. And I know that a lot of the neurodivergent kids, and just all the kids, they really noticed that, and I did too. So one of the themes, one of the messages is that everyone has a superpower inside them. And some other themes are acceptance and friendship. But if you had to choose just one theme or one message that you want your readers to take away from the Unforgettable Logan Foster, so what's the most important message you'd like them to take away from Logan's story?
I think it probably is that first thing, which is that the thing that makes you different is what makes you special. And instead of worrying about what makes you different and trying to hide it, if you lean into it, it becomes your superpower. Because I do believe that every human being, not kids, adults, you're the hero of your own story. Everybody wakes up every day with main character energy of some sort. And kids deserve to feel like they're the main character, that they're the hero of their own story. And it's hard to do that if there are things you know about yourself that you're not embracing. So I think the biggest thing for Logan isn't that he becomes part of a superhero family or that he becomes friends, it's that he finds a bunch of people that aren't asking him to change to make him fit their life. He meets a bunch of people that say, oh, this is who you are. Let's find out more about that. Why don't you just be more who you are instead of less? And and that's one of those messages that I think, whether you are neurodivergent, whether you are a foster kid or you come from a traditional home, whether you have a different disability, or whether you are blessed with all the things a kid could want, like the message of find people that want to be with you for who you are instead of who you have to change to be with is really, really powerful. And I hope that comes through. I think there's also a little bit there's a whole world that's hidden from you in this book, right? The idea that every comic book you've ever read, every Marvel or DC movie you've seen, every series is just there to cover up that superheroes are real. I don't know. Growing up, I always felt like maybe that there was a whole world out there that the adults were kind of like not showing me. So that's a metaphor too here, is that Logan has made a bunch of assumptions because he's so factually based that the world is a certain way. And once you realize that some of those assumptions aren't real or that they were forced on you, the world opens up and suddenly anything is possible, like you were saying.
Yeah. And my next question is, was there someone who inspired you to pursue writing? Obviously not your parents, because you didn't want anything to do with them at the time. A teacher, author, or role model?
Oh, wow. But my parents did inspire me. I mean, they're both wonderful writers, very different writers. And so I think there is that piece of, I may not have wanted to be a writer, but it was because it was so easily attainable. Like if your mom does it and your dad does it, you have to have some sort of rebellion. Mm-hmm. So I would say that they were definitely an inspiration, but I had a high school theater teacher and director named Dr. Francis X. Ford, which, of course, if people that read the book, there's a character named Dr. Francis X. Chrysler, who I named after him. And he was my very first mentor. And even though I did very little writing for him, I wrote a couple of one-act plays and such, he was the person that taught me that idea that everyone is the hero of their own story. I was playing a bad guy in a high school play, and he was giving me a bunch of direction, and I was like, well, I'm the bad guy. And he says, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. I did terrible things in this. And he goes, no, you cannot play a bad guy. everyone's the hero of their own story. So you just have to figure out why your character thinks he's the hero of this story. And then all the bad things they do are justified because whatever the hero does is justified. And while that was an acting lesson for me, it became a bigger lesson for me in terms of writing and in terms of how I actually try to interact with people that I meet, especially people that I'm finding difficult, is I try to get that little bit of empathy, and I say, well, what's the story they're telling themselves where the way they're acting is not only justified, it's necessary. They're the hero of their own story. I just haven't figured out what that story is yet. So he was quite an inspiration. So maybe not an inspiration to be a writer, but certainly an inspiration to tell stories of some sort.
And now it's time for the final question. The question that I ask every single one of my guests. If you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real, from any time period, literally just anybody, who would it be and why?
I wish I knew this was coming, and I'm still like stuck. But if I could meet anyone from any literary time period, but it has to be the fictional character, not the author, right?
It could be the author, somebody related to like writing.
Okay, then it's such a trite answer, but growing up, I loved Shakespeare. I loved reading Shakespeare. I loved acting in Shakespeare. I loved that he wrote poems. I loved that he wrote plays. I loved that some of his plays were funny and some of his plays were decidedly not funny and were really like borderline horror, even though that wasn't a term back then. And yeah, and I've been lucky enough to go to the Globe Theatre in London, which isn't the original Globe that he worked at, but is still a recreation of it. And every time I've gone there, I just feel in awe that like somebody that wrote something that long ago was still so interesting and relevant. So if you give me Bill Shakespeare, I'll be a pretty happy dude.
Yeah, and I'd be a happy dude as well, because I've played in a couple Shakespeare plays, and while nearly every single one of the words I might not understand, I just think that the stories, like you can, as if you do a little research, I have to have like a whole Shakespeare dictionary. It's a lot bigger than I thought. And like if you really dig into the stories, they're so just like you said, intricate. There's so much to them that like wherefore art thou? Like if I hadn't done Shakespeare, I wouldn't have had a clue what that meant.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of implied, but also like, what century do you think this is?
Yeah.
But I love Shakespeare plays, and sometimes the comedy doesn't really make much sense. Like in this time period, being a kid in the 2020s, but it's still just, it's so just, yeah, I love Shakespeare plays. And I remember I played Touchstone in As You Like It, and I dug that character. Like he's just hilarious. Even if like I couldn't understand some of the words, you could just tell that he was a funny guy. So yeah. I love Shakespeare plays. They're so much fun, and I would recommend that to anybody watching. Just read some Shakespeare, or maybe just watch a play. I think that'd be a lot more fun if you don't really understand.
It's a lot easier than reading it.
Yeah. So that's all. I totally 100% enjoyed this interview. My guest today has been the wonderful debut author of The Unforgettable Logan Foster, Shawn Peters. So The Unforgettable Logan Foster, you need to read it. Like, that's an understatement. You absolutely 1,000,000% need to read it. You need to follow Logan Foster's like hilarious, important, and just downright adventurous, super fun superhero stories. You're going to love the character Logan Foster. You're going to love all the characters, and you're just going to have a really good time, and you're not going to want to put the book down. So from relatable characters to superheroes, Shawn's novel is truly Unforgettable. And I can't wait for book 2 of the series to come out in 2023. Woo! So I'm so excited to follow Logan's adventures, and you can too. Read the book, and you can check out Shawn Peters' website, ShawnPetersWrites.com. Thanks for joining me today, Shawn. You're simply the best.
That is a fact.
That is a fact. Yeah, you're so humble.
Well, I should have said that you being a great host, that is a fact, because you really do a wonderful job talking to authors, and we love talking to you.
We all have a superpower inside us. It's just a matter of using it to do good and to lead the fight for change. Be like Logan Foster. You can do anything. You can do anything, because Logan Foster did it. I'm doing this podcast, even though, like, I'm interviewing people that are 10 times cooler than me. So you can really do anything. Just take it from me, take it from Logan Foster, take it from Shawn Peters. You can do anything, as I said 200 times. Have a great day, everybody. Keep reading.